Good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2019. Welcome to the Ask the Experts webinar for this week. We did not have one last week. I had the good fortune of taking a week off, as was mandated by my boss at First Canada, Mark Bredner, who told me I can't go to an event every weekend, so I did not. It turned out that the two events that were on last weekend at North Bay and at the in Windsor, Essex, are incredibly well run. They have a great group of organizers and volunteers, and I was not needed. I'm not really sure that I'm needed at the other events, but in any case, I go to the other events and pretend to be needed. So I took the opportunity to take a family vacation with my wife and daughter, and we went to Puerto Vallarta, and we returned last night. It was a great time. And during that, I did have the opportunity to text and email back and forth with several people. So I want to thank those people that were able to do a couple of favors for me in Windsor and North Bay to help out some teams that were maybe not as experienced as them. I think that was really helpful and very graciously professional, so thank you. As always, the webinars are being recorded and they will be posted to the First Canada YouTube channel, and we'll send out that link to all the people that have signed up over the past season to listen in or participate in the webinars. So you should get some of that stuff. So this week I wanted to do a couple of things, and one of them was to talk about the events that are coming up in week 6 and a little bit beyond that. And by beyond, I mean the provincial championships in Ontario and the World Championships in Houston and Detroit, which are coming up faster than anybody could have imagined. My expert this week may or may not be Craig Maynard. He's my expert out in Alberta, and they have their event going on this week. So he may be busy with preparations. We did chat a little bit. If he is able to join us, that would be great. But without further ado, I want to point out that there are actually in Canada 4 events going on this weekend or this week. The first of those is a very new event, first-year event, Festival de Robotique at Quebec City. It's a regional event. Those of you that are newish teams over the last 2-3 years in Ontario may not have been to a regional event, but a regional event, for example, such as in Quebec City or earlier in the year in Montreal. I think Montreal was week 1, or in Vancouver, Victoria in BC, which was also a regional, and the one this coming week in Calgary, which is another regional. Those events, teams qualified directly for the World Championships from those events. So for example, at this event in Quebec City, the teams that are on the winning alliance, they will qualify for direct entry to the event in, probably in Detroit, but that's a little bit of a rule issue there, so we maybe talk about that a little bit. And the teams that win Rookie All-Star and the teams that win Engineering Inspiration, I believe, and for sure the team that wins the Chairman's Award. So you could actually go into this event as your 3rd event if you're a district team, such as an Ontario team, but you can't you can't qualify to win some of those awards if you're a district team. So for example, you could win the championship, or you could and then go to the World Championships as an Ontario team through that route. But in any case, if you've never been to Quebec City and you're thinking that maybe that would be a nice event to go to in the future, I'm sure it will be. Quebec City is a spectacularly scenic place in North America and Canada. It's an amazing city to visit. I've only actually ever been there in the summer, which was spectacular, but of course during the winter they have so many more other things that are going on, and now they're adding to that a regional first robotics event. The link there will give you more information if you want to watch some of it, or if you're trying to get an idea of what kinds of things are going on. It's a pretty good size event for a first year event. It's got 35 teams, and you can see, as typically happens with the regional events and what used to happen in Ontario with regional events before we went to the district model, is there are teams from all over the world going to that event. So if you get a chance to take a look at that, you might want to tune in and watch some of the matches as they go on and see some of these things. Again, one of the best things about the regional events is the teams that you get from other places in the world that come to watch and or come to compete. I know there's French teams from France that usually go to the Montreal event, and I guess the difficult thing about the event is that if you're a foreign team and you compete and you are fortunate enough to be one of the award winners that qualify directly for the Worlds, is that the turnaround time is pretty quick. So this is week 6. So week 6, then we have week 7, and then a couple of weeks later, or a week a bit later than that, would be the World Championship that many of these teams would go to. The Australian team, for example, the Australians typically are the part of the world that goes to Houston, which cuts the time even shorter. So let's say that you're, just to get back to the point you mentioned, let's say if you're an Ontario team and you go to compete in this one and you win it, therefore qualify for the World Championships, you will actually so Ontario can only send about 30 teams to the World Championships. Our World Championships are Detroit. So even though you might compete in BC, for example, whose teams normally go to Houston, because you're from Ontario, if you qualify an event that's outside of the boundaries for teams that go to Detroit, like the Ontario teams and Quebec teams do, then you would still be going to Detroit. So you would go to your home event. So if this Australian team is able to qualify, they would be going to Houston, which is the first of the 2 World Championships. Anyways, I don't want to get into that in too much detail. It is kind of a sticking point that most of us in Ontario don't have to worry about, but it is. 1241, for example, from Rick Hansen High School, Mississauga, they qualified. They won the first event in Victoria last year in BC, and they did qualify for the World Championships. And had they been a BC team or an Alberta team, they would have gone to Houston. But because they're an Ontario team, they competed in Detroit with the rest of us from Ontario and Quebec. Anyways, should be a great event. If I wasn't at an event myself, I would certainly be watching that one on my computer. Next, we have the event in Calgary, which started in 2013. And the only reason I know that is because the team I was with at the time, we went to the very first event, the Canadian Rockies Regional. They've moved around to a couple of venues. This new venue, the Genesis Center, I think is attached to a high school. I believe it's Nelson Mandela High School, and I hear the venue is pretty spectacular. So as you can see, this attracts many teams from around the world, and there are teams there from BC and Saskatchewan. I mentioned Saskatchewan because Saskatchewan has, like I say, 5 teams, and they're all going to that Calgary one. Is the closest one, I think, to them. So good luck to all of them. I see the information as a regular basis. I try to keep track of that and follow them. But 6 U.S. teams, including a team from Hawaii, and 2 Mexican teams, 2 teams from China, and another Australian team. So if the Australian team, again, go back to beat this dead horse of a point, if the Australian team qualifies from the Canadian Rockies Regional, they would go to their home event, which is Houston. So the Houston Championships are the ones that the Australian teams go to, and the Mexican teams. I think most of the U.S. teams are at the Calgary event, Canadian Rockies Regional, are also from that part of the world and would have qualified to go to Houston. So, and again, if you've never been to a championships and you get a chance to volunteer, it's pretty spectacular. So the finals for the Houston event are in a baseball stadium, and the finals for the Detroit event are in a football stadium. In any case, in Ontario, we have our final two district events. This is the last week of district play in Ontario. I would imagine it's the same in Michigan. Michigan is also a district because each of those areas needs 1 week for their provincial and state championships, respectively. So just a little bit of information about the Ontario. The Western Ontario event, I think, has about 40 teams. The McMaster event has a few fewer. But all of that is available if you go onto the Blue Alliance. You can check out to see who's in what event, and later on see videos that are posted of some of the matches as well as the events. Once they conclude, a lot of videos get posted, but you can watch live, and there's a link through the First Canada Robotics website as well that you can check that out on Twitch TV. So a week after this one, a quick turnaround time after these two events will be the provincial championships. 80 teams will go to the provincial championships. I wanted to say the top 80 teams in points, but that's not entirely accurate, because you could win a chairman's award, for example, or you could be an all-star, the all-star team from, the Hall of Fame team, I should say, from 11-14, and not get enough points but still qualify. But of course, 11-14 usually has no problem qualifying, as they all are a Hall of Fame team and one of the best teams in the world, and certainly one of the most helpful teams in Ontario. They're pretty much willing to help you in any way they can, which is spectacular, which is one of the great features of FIRST Robotics. So 80 teams will go to the provincial championships. There are currently about 173 teams in Ontario. And that sort of brings into play this last part, which is how many points will it take to get in? So last year it took 49 points. So the 80th team, the team that qualified 80th, they had 49 points, and they were able to go in. So I'm just going to bring over this one. I have a link here, this FRC leaderboard. So you can see here, and you can see that the link is there. This is for, and you can actually find the one for 2018 as well. The one for 2018, though, includes stats from the provincial championships, so the numbers you would see are pretty high. So as you can see, here are some that are qualified. Now, the ones that are going to list qualified here for the district championship, and again, it's the provincial championships in Ontario, and that's the title given to us by First Headquarters. They're qualified because they were chairman's winners. So all the ones along the side are chairman's winners. They're qualified, but you can see the points that they have. Now, as we go down, you'll start to see that some teams have not played their final event, and that's going to obviously be in Western Ontario or McMaster. So you can see that that's the case as well. So even as we go further down, you can see that as we get close to the 80s, so there we are at 80. So at 80 we have the Cybergnomes, and they have 43 total points. But we can see that there's a couple teams under them, 1075 and 781, who have very close to the same number of points, but still play an event. So the chances are that they might get up into the top 80. So they've got a really good chance of it. But how far down could we go? You can see the teams that have played twice and maybe don't have as many points as the 80th place team are pretty much not going to get in. People are going to get more points than that. But how many is it going to be? It looks at this point like it'll take more than 40 points to get in there. How many more? 49 points. How many more will it take? That's hard to say. I've heard different estimates. Some people are saying in the mid 50s. I think I heard someone suggest that Karthik had suggested that it was going to be closer to the low 60s. We have no real track record of this, as we've only had it for a couple of years, so it really is kind of hard to say what's going to happen. But in another couple of years, we'll definitely see patterns emerging. But I guess the wild card in all of this is each year we have more teams. So there were, I think, if I recall correctly, there were 157 teams last year. There's 173 teams this year. There are still 80 going to the provincials both years, so 80 teams going. And we also have an extra event this year. So we had a new event last year, and we have a new event this year. So that changes the equation. So it's going to be a challenge to figure out exactly who's going to be able to go and who's going to, and that's going to go down. It's going to go down right to the last minute. However, when that does happen, you can kind of check out the points here. There's points for different things, as you might already know. So you can check that out, and you can get some more information about the First Ontario Provincial Championship at this link, which is available if you're looking at it right now on the First Canada website, First Robotics Canada, as you can see there, which gives you some more information about that the event. So if you go to that site, this is where it is, and it'll give you some more information about all the things that are going on, including this great new initiative by the Girls in STEM Executive Advisory Council, who are running a provincial championship food drive. So of course, as you may know, that's quite close to the holidays that are coming up, both for Passover and for Easter. And it's a great initiative that they've been talking about doing, and now that they're ready to go, they're going to go forward with it. But as you'll see, you can download the team guide here, and it has information about the teams need to know, what to bring, where the location is, if you're from outside of the GTA and you're intending to stay over, what's involved with that. So there's a bunch of different things that are there, and it's just it was just downloaded or uploaded, I guess in this case, this afternoon. So you will have breaking information there, all the information that you'd want to know. But of course, there's a good chance that there's something that you want to know that's not there. So please feel free to contact anybody at First Canada. You can contact me at pkeenan@firstinspires.org, and hopefully after my return from Mexico, I'll be a little bit more up to speed tomorrow. Be a little bit more well rested, and I can reply to any of those things you have. On a webinar that Mark Bredner, President of First Canada, and Kim Cooper, Vice President of Partnerships at First Canada, did a few weeks ago, that Mark mentioned that he has a big announcement to make coming up about First Canada at the Provincial Championships. So that'll be exciting. I think everybody will be interested to hear what that is. And I'm not going to give any hints, so you can guess all you want, but that's not going to happen. I will not be saying what it is. One of the things I will say, however, is that there is some confusion about the title of the event. It is, in fact, called the Ontario Provincial Championships. Some people are still saying it's District Championships, but that is not the official name. The official name is the Ontario Provincial Championships. So hopefully that might clear up that part. Then, and again, I would say if you ever get a chance to volunteer at these events, they're pretty spectacular. I have been to, I volunteer, those of you who have seen me at some events in Ontario selling t-shirts and hoodies and so forth, that's kind of what I'm asked to do at the events in Ontario, and I'm happy to do it. It's a great way to support teams and to meet people that are interested in finding out more about starting teams, whether they be First Lego League Junior, or the new one coming up next year, First Lego League Junior Discovery for kindergartens using Duplo, which is being piloted already in Ontario, or First Lego League, which is run by Dave Ellis and had 550 teams this year. Of course, First Lego League Junior, which is the grade 1 to 4 program, is run by Christine Bibick out of the Waffles in Kingston, has had over 700 and I want to say 60 teams running this year, which is pretty spectacular. And of course, FRC, which is the regional director for this, John Hobbins, we have, like I said before, 173 teams. So all of those programs are represented in Houston and Detroit, and we try to get those programs represented in our provincial championships. And again, in Houston and Detroit, there's also the program that we don't have yet in Ontario, which is the First Tech Challenge, FTC, and there are teams in Houston and Detroit for that, and some of those will be teams coming in Houston anyways, possibly from BC or Alberta. Anyways, the Houston and Detroit World Championships are coming up soon. I have been lucky enough to volunteer at both over the last 2 years, which has been fun. It's busy but fun. And at those events, I do registration. So if you go to one of those events with a team or as a spectator, you have to get a badge, and that's where you will see me. In any case, Houston, I looked before the webinar started this evening. There are 267 teams already registered and ready to go, have qualified for spots in Houston. There's 133 spots left to go. Some of those will be filled from the event in BC. Sorry, some of them were filled by the event in BC, and some more will be filled by through the event in Calgary this weekend. And again, like I mentioned, if the Australian team qualifies from Quebec City, that would also end up being one that goes through to Houston. The Detroit event, which is the week after Houston, as you can see, there's 177 teams in and 223 spots left to go, 30 of which will be obviously teams from Ontario. There'll be more teams from Quebec through the Quebec City one. There will be teams, a huge number of teams that qualify out of Michigan. So a lot of those spots will be going and so forth in the next little while. One of the things I should mention, if you don't know this, is if you're a lead coach, mentor 1 or 2, you can actually have your team waitlisted, meaning that you say, well, at some point in the season, you say, I think we look like we're going to be pretty good. And even prior to the season starting, you can put your team on a wait list for one of the World Championships. You can even put your team on a wait list if you're an Ontario team for the Houston Championship. So there is some leeway in moving back and forth. So you could go to one of those championships. Team I was with a few years ago, I put the team on the wait list and we qualified. So there are teams from Ontario every year that qualify through the wait list. You just have to be ready to go when you get the nod. And you can be on that. You could be at the World Championships, which is an incredible experience. So as you can see, so far between the two events, there are 13 FRC teams that have qualified. There are teams from FLL that are going, I think, from both Ontario and possibly Nova Scotia and the West Coast. And it's a little bit more difficult for me to find teams qualifying for FTC World Championships, but last year there were a few teams from Alberta and BC that qualified, so there's also those opportunities. In any case, lots of things going on in the next little while, in addition to the great stuff that's happened so far in Victoria and in Montreal and in I guess there's been 8 events district events that have been completed in Ontario, with 2 to go and then 1 provincial championship. So lots of robotics going on. If you know of people that are interested in starting teams, please put them in contact with one of us or point them to the website, and hopefully we'll have even better numbers for next year. But But like I say, if you do have any questions about any of the things that were discussed tonight, and you're online right now watching, please feel free to type them in the chat box. And if I can answer them, and some of them I may not be able to, I can definitely find someone who can and connect with you at another time. But we have lots of great things that are going on, lots of surprises coming for the provincial championships, and lots of exciting matches that are going to go down to the wire at the events coming up in all four of the venues, Quebec City, London, Ontario, Hamilton, and Calgary. I will say that I did go to an event. I think the last one I was at was the last day of the York event, and it was crazy. It was so much fun. It was an amazing event. And then at the same weekend, I was in Waterloo, and that was another amazing event. 1114 again was at one of the events I was at in 2056, and those robots were spectacular. As were some of the other ones. I saw some great robots from many of the teams around Ontario, 4917, 1241. It was great to see 6140 win the York event. That was a thrill. I know the lead mentor, Mary Charles Hills, very well, so she was ecstatic. It's nice to see new teams doing well and teams that have been around for a couple of years upping their game, and that bodes well for all the teams that are attending or will be attending the provincial championships and then the world championships. But again, if you do have any questions, if you have things that you're interested in learning more about, or you have suggestions for things you want to talk about on the website or on the webinars, please let me know at pkeenan@firstinspires.org. And having said that, I will bid you good night. And I will be at Western, so if you're going to be at Western, I hope I see you there. If not, if your team is at the World Provincial Championships, I'll see you there. And if your team is not, it would be great to see you drop by and see the Provincial Championships and cheer on some of the teams that you've been in alliances with already and worked with. And hopefully, we'll see you soon. Good night.